Hello, everyone. This is Doug Camplejohn, and welcome to Revenue Renegades. In this week's episode, I am very excited to welcome Mark Kosoglow, the CEO and founder of Operator AI. Mark, welcome to the show.
What up, Doug?
Great to have you. Mark and I think Mark, when he was running sales at Outreach, my last company, FlipTop, I think we had some very early calls. So we had some interactions there. And I am very excited to see him take the CEO and founder mantle for Operator. Tell us a little bit about the company and tell us the founding story. How did Operator come about?
Yeah. Well, Doug, listen, it's we've crossed paths a few times. You guys, FlipTop was our first case study at Outreach, and I'll never forget. I went into your office with Jess, and we filmed the whole thing on an iPhone sitting on top of 4 cardboard boxes. But that definitely was. I mean, the results were amazing, so it was an awesome case study. But yeah, so Operator is almost in response to what Outreach has led to. And, I was the first employee at Outreach. I led sales to about 230 million. I then went to become CRO at Catalyst because I thought post-sales was where the investment dollars were moving and everybody was focused on it. Everybody loved to talk about it, but nobody wanted to spend money. It's a really unempowered group of people that are just working their best against a bunch of odds that are up against them. And it was very difficult space to be inside of. Gainsight CEO, Nick Mehta, God's gift to those people. Like, he really, to do it for this long and the way that he does it and the way that he cares is pretty impressive for that many years. But when I was leaving Catalyst, Max Altshuler, who founded GTM Fund and Sales Hacker, and I worked with for a long time at Outreach, called me and he's like, "Hey, what are you going to do after this?" And I was like, "I don't know." I said, "I'm going to probably take some time and do some consulting and advising." And he said, "Well, why don't you incubate a company inside a GTM Fund?" And I was like, "Well, what are you thinking?" And he's like, "Well, maybe there's something that we could do in the data space." And he's like, "Would you want to be the CEO co-founder?" And I said, "Hell no." And Max was like, "Okay, no problem. But why don't you do this?" And Max knows me. So he's like, "I had this idea around contact data and Zoom info. Why don't you go talk to a bunch of people and see if it has legs?" Well, I talked to about 50 people in about 2 or 3 weeks. And after that, I had an opinion. I had a solution. I had some thoughts. I had a little passion. And I was like, Max, I think I do want to do this now. So we did the paperwork. We raised some money with Primary Ventures. And then we started down the path of figuring out exactly what we needed to distill out of those 50 conversations. And now this is kind of crazy. Since the end of July, I've had 700 conversations with people, and I feel like I really understand this problem space as good as anyone. And I think that the solution we're building is going to really close a gap that most organizations are having problems with.
That's a great background, and Max is a smart guy.
He sure is.
He knows how to pull the puppet strings. So you've talked, one of the phrases when Operator launched that I loved that you coined is kind of the great ignore, right? Tell me a little bit about what that means and specifically, how does Operator address that?
Yeah. Well, industrial sales outreach at scale has led to this concept of the great ignore, which is, it doesn't matter what we're doing. We're just kind of yelling into an empty vacuum because people would much rather ignore the 100 emails in their inbox than find the 3 or 4 that there's something valuable that they might want to respond to. I wouldn't say that's totally true, but we're moving towards that more and more, faster and faster. And, I think that there's this concept that, and nobody would admit this, but this is what it boils down to, is I can buy people's attention in bulk. As long as I come up with a snazzy enough, I connect this tool to this data source and do this with AI and do this and this. And the next thing you know, if somebody wanders onto my website, this literally just happened to me. I have a buddy who started his startup. He did a post on LinkedIn. I clicked on the article, which took me to his webpage. And guess what? I now have an email in my inbox about wanting to buy his product. I don't want to buy his product. I just want to see what he was up to and understand it. I've no money, no desire, no need. But that's what we've done now, is we've now taken it so that, that unnecessary email plus the 7 or 10 more I'll get this hour. It just creates too much. So what Operator is doing is we're going back to a old school approach for people that want to build relationships and solve actual problems. And we want to couple that with this new school AI approach. So we've created a multi-agentic approach that does 3 basic things. One, we do the homework on exactly what your company does, who cares about it, what metrics you impact, what features that you have that line to different value props. And we do a really deep dive on who are you. Once we understand who you are, then we know much better what kind of problems you solve, and we find the customers that have those problems. I would say like one shorthand way of describing Operators, imagine if you could have the discovery call, but everybody had amnesia, and you came back the next day and wrote the email to get the meeting. That's the type of emails that we're in. And it's not just emails, but messaging that we're doing. We find the problem and then prove that you're suffering from it, and then use that in messaging. And then the last thing we do is, again, we culminate all that data into what we call audience of one messaging, which is you could read any email that we write and it would make sense, but it wouldn't be relevant because it's really tailored for a single person at a time.
Got it.
And I don't mean personalized, like, hey, Doug, we know that you love volleyball.
Right.
Wouldn't you like to bounce around and set up a few deals here and there? And, some kind of goof. That's not what we do. It's all based around pain.
So very much still, it's an email platform, but just the level of precision by combining massive amounts of data and AI to really understand and craft something that's truly personal.
Yeah, we spend a significant amount of money on what we call our core data set that has 700 or 800 different data attributes about a company. We built an agent that can go out and fetch other data. And then we have I think 7 or 8 different agents, but one of the agents then, its job is to take the context of that. What do you do, right? What does coffee do? Right. Who cares about it? And then it looks at all of that data that we filter that data down to just the things that are relevant to the prospect and our customer. And then it just looks through all that for the data that maps exactly to a problem that company solves. And it's pretty amazing what you can do when you look at things like that, because there's so much data now, and the AI can actually do things that a human can't conceivably do other than one-off every once in a while. Maybe you do a company or 2 a week. That's what we've distilled all of that data down into. Find the problems.
So what does onboarding then look like for your customers? So if somebody's coming in, are you just scraping their website? Are you ingesting their help center? Are you doing a lot of interviews or forums with bringing them on board? How do you really understand who they are and what they're selling?
I found that the big barrier to entry with these AI platforms is I end up spending so much time telling the AI what I want to do that I could just do it myself, right? So right now, like if someone was to come in and do a demo, I would say, give me 2 companies you want to get into, and I'll take your domain and I'll run everything just with that. And so first thing we create is this contextual profile, which is who are you? That's all the homework, right? Mm-hmm. We're getting that 90 to 95% right. And in onboarding, we would do the slight adjustments like, hey, I don't want 4 value props. I want 3, or I would like to word this way, or you're the way that you're thinking about this metric might be a little off. So we do a little tweaking there. Then that's what informs on how to shrink the data set down to something that's manageable. And then once we do that, now we create the messaging. And then in onboarding, we look at that messaging that's based on this really dialed in contextual profile. And we say, okay, is the tone right? Do you like these kind of CTAs? Do you want to use a lot of facts or less facts? And so we can start to like dial in the kind of messaging that you want to do. And then once you do that, then you're ready to roll.
Got it. Can you share some? I know you guys are still in stealth, and so feel free to push back on this, but like I'd love to hear just some anecdotes of how people are using the platform today and kind of the results they've seen.
Yeah, how about I do this? Is I will read you an email that was created for one of our customers. Then I'll explain to you how we created this email.
Perfect.
So this is an email written for a company that helps people hire software engineers and do it faster and more accurately. And it's written to Lyft.com. So it's them trying to get Lyft as a customer. So this is, and again, I want to be really clear. No human touched this messaging at all. This is 100% developed in the system. And secondly, it was developed using our customer's domain and Lyft.com, and that's it. So we haven't even done all the onboarding. Like this was done in the sales cycle. That's one reason why I like using this example. So let's say something like this. Doug, your engineering team spends 12 and a half hours per technical hire, 25% above industry average with a 35-day hiring cycle. This level of engineering time investment significantly impacts team productivity and project velocity. With 140 planned tech hires, your team will spend 1,750 hours on interviews this year, equivalent to losing an entire engineer's productive time. We helped Unity reduce interview time by 50% while maintaining quality and processing 750 candidates in 90 days. And then we have like an offer-based CTA.
Wow.
Right? So let's unpack that. 12 and a half hours. How do we do that? So we have a feature called exhaustive citations. We almost got a 1-to-1 citation per metric used so that you can always check the validity of the data that we're using inside our messaging. So one of the citations for this was an interview guide for software engineers at Lyft on Lyft's website. Guess what it does? It lists out all the steps. Guess what it also does? It tells you how long each step lasts. When you add up the number of people and the time, guess what you get? 12 and a half hours. Wow. Like, I don't think any rep would figure that out, but it's right there. Right. Then it found an industry benchmark. It was smart enough to think, well, let me compare this. Is this good or bad? Right? It's not just a number. We didn't even know if it's good or bad. We call them comparative metrics. So then it goes and it finds another citation of, on average, it takes about 10 hours of interview time. So 12 and a half hours is 25% more. That's where we get that. Then the next thing is one of the coolest, which is it takes 35 days for hiring cycle. Well, our agent went to Glassdoor, found 308 different reviews on the interview process at Lyft. 68 of those reviews listed the amount of time they were in process. The average is 33 point something when we round up to 35 so that we don't seem weird with numbers, right? Then it went to 140 applicants. Well, we have proprietary data that shows us like departmental growth month over month, revenue growth, all these sorts of things. And then it goes and looks at job listings. Well, there's not 140, there's 139 open IT and software engineer jobs. You multiply that times the 12 and a half hours, times the number of people in the interview process, you get 1,750 hours. And this is where it blew my mind. It literally then wrote the sentence, and this is how much time, productive time you'll waste, or, this is an entire engineer's year of productivity. Like that, I mean, this is my favorite email that we've done. It blew my mind.
Yeah. That's amazing. That is incredible. So how do you see this fitting into the stack? Is this a replacement or for some of the tools that people are using today?
I would say that most contact data, like people, why do you buy somebody's email address and phone number? It's because you want a meeting. But there's a very large gap between that data and getting the meeting. What we've done is we've closed that gap. So for one of our customers, we sell in blocks of 10 accounts. So for an account, you would get 3 personas. So you get, head of marketing, head of demand gen, head of sales, or whatever you're selling a GTM product, right? Yeah. For each of those personas, we'll give you all the contact data that we have for that persona and those titles in that persona, including email, LinkedIn URLs, mobile, whatever. Yeah. Then underneath that, then we give you, for each persona, we give you 3 business problems that you can solve for that persona. So you have up to 9 business problems. Some of them overlap because they're closely related. The personas are, right? But up to 9 business problems. And then for each business problem, we give you an email draft, a LinkedIn DM draft, and a cold call conversation starter. So you have 27 pieces of content per thing if you just pick one person per persona. If you pick 2 people, you have 54 touch points that you can do that are all of that quality.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah.
It's just different, man. It's no more like, hey, Doug, I see that you're a CEO at Coffee. You're probably trying to figure out how to get your first 10 customers. Like, we've helped ABC do that. Well, you want to get in and see how you could do it too? Doug, you don't have any problem getting your first 10 customers. So that's a completely useless email.
No, it's just the level of noise, as you said, is just way too high. So I love what you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about kind of go-to-market. Obviously, at Outreach, you scaled to 0 to 200 million plus, as you said, under your leadership. What lessons from that journey have you taken to Operator, and what are you doing differently?
Yeah, I think a couple things. is one, I just in general, I think the more honest you are, the more business that you do. And so I've always been like at outreach. I remember I used to sometimes frustrate Manny because I would not sell as far ahead as he wanted. Because to me, it was like, I cannot sell something and in 6 months go back to that customer and we just don't have it. Like, so that's the first thing. I only sell what we can do right now. There's a bunch of stuff that we're going to be doing in the next few months, but that's one thing is I just am plain. This is what we do. We don't do that yet. We have this plan, but we don't have a timeline or whatever, right? That's the first thing. The second thing with outreach that we did is I talked to the former head of ops at Marketo. His name's Jeff Serlin. I don't know if you know Jeff or not. Really great guy. And Jeff, I remember at the beginning days of outreach, he actually had me come in to Marketo and he spent an entire day with me and showed me all of how he does his financial planning and his org planning and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there with Jeff and I'm just like, wow, I don't know how we ever get to this. I don't know how, this is so sophisticated. And at the time, I think Marketo had just gone public or they hadn't quite been bought by Vista yet, but they were in that mode. And so one thing he taught me in that is there's a certain point, there's an inflection point where people don't quite trust what you do. And there's not enough social proof to justify just people buying it. So he did something in outreach called a 112, which is a 1 month opt out with it, that if you didn't opt out, you went into a 12-month contract. We did from probably 4 or 5 million to 20 million on those contracts. And we converted 92% of them. And so I'm doing the same thing at operators. Like I don't want to assign somebody that hates me in a month and just churn, but like I'm just sticking around. So we're doing very, we'll prove to you contract styles where people have a chance to test it, get some ideas and see if it works for them or not. And to me, like if you have confidence in your product and you're building the right thing, you don't have any problem doing that. If you are nervous about people opting out, then that means that they're going to churn at the end of year one. And that means that you don't know what you're doing anyway. So this helps us speed up that cycle. That's another big thing that we're doing right now.
I love that. So you've talked a lot as well. I've read a lot of your stuff about creativity in sales. How do you foster that in your team?
I think most people are not as creative as they could be because they're afraid of failing, because failing and risk are things that we don't like to talk about. Because then as leaders, it makes us feel nervous. And I'll never forget, I read a book called The Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitomer. It's this weird little book that's like it's almost like a graphic novel in some ways, but it's all about sales. And the whole point of the book is be yourself and like do some crazy shit. Like you break out of the pattern, right? Like just do some stuff. And I read that book and I was doing really good in my sales career. But I was selling stuff to schools, and I'll never forget. Do you remember the Deal or No Deal game with Howie Mandel?
Yep.
And you remember all those little suitcases he had? Well, I bought, I think, 200 of those suitcases, and I put inside of them all of our materials. And on the outside, I just put a little like luggage tag that said, "I've got a deal for you." And I went into 200 schools. And I dropped this case at the front door and people would be like, "Who's this for?" I'd be like, "This is a PTO." They're like, "What is it?" I was like, "It's a deal for them." And I'd leave. Super mysterious, little weird. Guess how many meetings I set up with those 200 cases? Like 150 meetings. Wow. I had so many meetings I couldn't handle all of them. And so that was like my thing of like, and so I did several things. Like one year I brought like all of the secretaries at all the schools a plant. Like there's this thing called a crocus in Pennsylvania. It's the first flower that comes up. I got a greenhouse in the wintertime to make those. And my crocuses came out 2 weeks before they came out in the wild. And I went around to every school and gave everybody this crocus. And everybody's like, I'm in Pennsylvania. Oh my God, we can't wait for summer to get out. Crocus means spring here. That got me hundreds of meetings or dozens of meetings. And but here's the deal is I was a 1099 employee on 100% commission. If I failed, it was on me. Nobody's going to come fire me. You know what I mean? I just would self-select out. And so I didn't have this, I'm an SDR and I want to do something crazy, but if it doesn't work, I'm going to lose a month of productivity and I'm going to go on a PIP. And I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy about my sales cultures and I'm very intentional about is I want people to take risks and I want you to feel comfortable talking about risks. And so I think that's the reason why people aren't as creative as they should be, and how to sponsor it is you have to create an environment where you're taking risks, you're showing people you're taking risks, you're showing people they're failing, you're talking about it. People often tell me I'm way too transparent with stuff, but you know what? I'm almost 50 years old. I don't give a shit. That's who I am. That's how I work. You either like it or you don't, right, at this point. But that's what I think you need, is you need that kind of environment where people are like, all right, I'm going to take a risk for a month, but I know I'm not going to get fired as long as I talk about it, we measure it, we think about it, and everybody agrees it's a good idea. Then just go fucking do it.
Yeah, I love that Venn diagram, kind of the be yourself, be genuine, you're solving problems and take the risks. I think, the problem is if somebody just lives inside of one of those circles where they're just like, well, I'm just going to go spam 10,000 people, or I'm going to do this crazy street marketing thing that damages the brand and things like that. But if you put those things together in an interesting container, that comes together and really well. Let's talk a little bit about training. So when you think about, I think I read somewhere like you once had new hires sell pizza on their first day. Is that right?
I don't know if I can take credit for that. So our SDR team at Outreach would, when on the first week of onboarding, they would get a list of 20 or so companies in Seattle, and their job was to call them up and sell them pizza for lunch. And at the end of it, and some people actually did it and actually sold some pizza and whatever, and we would pay for it and be free, whatever. But what was interesting is at the end of that time, you get, because people would be like, what are you talking about? We don't, the range of reaction to that was so wide and varied, and it was horrible on one end, decent on one end, norm. And then at the end of that, they would just say, hey, listen, what was the worst call you had? And people would talk about it, be like, that's the worst call you ever have. You just had your worst call. And it was this whole thing of like, get used, like, it's okay to have these bad situations. And so, our SDR team, that was the thing. They also had to, I think, pick 5 executives at our company and call us up and try to sell us on a meeting for outreach. And so we'd get ready. You'd be like, hey, all right, this Tuesday is, SDR ramp day when they're calling execs. Make sure you answer your phone. And we'd pick up and I'm about to go to a meeting and do all that kind of stuff. But there was just that kind of real world situation to show them like, it's not that bad. It's just somebody saying no.
What are some of the other things that you've either done or seen that are you think are effective in terms of ramping sales reps or training sales reps?
Yeah, ramping is tough. So it's funny. There was one season where I wasn't the head of sales at Outreach. And that's because the board asked me to do a special project because we just weren't ramping reps. And I spent a quarter or two, I can't remember, putting together an extremely detailed thing. But I would say it also started with like defining the type of people we were hiring. And then after that, I just focused on that for like a quarter or two. And then I went back to my normal role. But like in that, what I found was people have difficulty coming into a new situation and getting their bearings of what's going on in their surroundings and who to talk to. And if you start talking to the wrong person, you start getting bad ideas. You start listening to the wrong calls, you get bad ideas. And what I really found was, if we just got together every day, and at the beginning of the day, I'm like, what are the 3 things that you're doing this day? And then at the end of the day, I met with all of them and be like, what did you get done? And what are you thinking about for tomorrow? Just that rhythm of daily accountability of these, I will get these 3 things done. And then I'll be like, well, why are you doing that? And who are you talking to about that? And that allowed me to start to understand like what's going on in their head. How are they thinking about getting help and doing these things? And then I would direct it in the right path. But that was I can't remember, we call it the daily 3, I think. So 8 o'clock in the morning, you tell me your 3 things. We get on a call, it's half an hour long. End of the day, half an hour. What did you get done? What are you thinking about for tomorrow? And that was really an awesome ramping thing because it made sure that we kept people in the right lines.
What do you think is that time window to kind of like the trial period? Because no one hires 100%. No one bets 1,000, right? What do you think is that window to be like, this person's going to cut it or they're not going to cut it?
So I really boil down whether somebody can cut it or not down to skill and will, or effort and execution. And what I mean by that is I'm paying you a base salary for effort that I get to define, and you've agreed to in taking that base salary. That could be 100 cold calls a day. It could be 1,000 cold calls a day. You know up front, and if you agree to it, I expect you to do it. if I expect the rep to put in the effort, I expect the manager to turn that effort into execution and into results. So for me, I have a very short fuse for effort. Like if you don't do your effort for a month, I'm probably thinking about putting you on a PIP because that's controllable. If you're not getting if you're doing the effort, but you're not getting the results, then I actually don't look at the rep. I look at the manager. And I'm like, this rep is doing all the things that we're saying we're doing. Your job is to make sure that it turns into results. And so I'll be way more patient with that rep. Now, over time, if they can't be coached and it just isn't working, even if they're putting in the effort, you got to let them go. But that's how I think about that is effort is from the rep. Execution is based on the manager. And I'll give a rep a quarter on execution or more, but not on effort. Effort is I'm paying you to do this. You're robbing me if you don't do what I asked you to do.
Got it. That's a great segue. When you think about leadership in sales, what kind of traits separate a kind of average sales leader from a great one, an exceptional one?
I think street cred, like I would hope, and I think this is true, that reps would say they brought me on calls because I would help. But I also wouldn't move, when I get onto a call, for example, for me, I want to know what is my role and I do my role and I don't step outside of that role unless I feel like something disastrous is happening. And I think so I built up a lot of street cred because I would hop on the tough negotiation calls. I would hop on, I remember at Catalyst one time, I did, 100 cold calls one day just to show people that I would do them. At Outreach, I remember we had one time there was a problem where our AEs were just not in outreach like they should be. And so I was like, you guys want to do me? I'm going to take for a week, I'm going to take one rep's tasks and I'm going to do all your tasks for you for a day in outreach. And I'm going to video it and tell you how I'm doing it. Cause I still felt like at that point I was the best user of outreach. And that was when we were over $100 million. I did that. And I'd send out every day, here's my 30-minute video of me doing your 50 tasks in half an hour in a well-researched, super awesome way. And so I think that street cred is the number one thing. If you're, not to use a bad analogy, but if you're an army, you want your commander in the trenches with you, not back 7 rows out of the danger, right? So I think that's a big thing is street cred. The other thing is I think that the depth of relationship you have with individuals determines is directly proportional to the amount of stuff you can ask from them. So if I have very shallow relationships, then when I get on and ask for, weekends or late nights or something that might do that, I have no basis for asking that because I don't understand the person. But if I have a deep relationship, then I can ask for crazy things. And so I really enjoy people in general, and I really enjoy and value relationships and deep relationships. And so I would say that's one of the biggest things that I think separates really great leaders is they actually do have a relationship. At Outreach, it's kind of crazy. Any deal over $10,000 that closed, even when we were doing $25 million quarters, I would send that rep a personalized Slack congratulating them on that deal, along with some kind of information or inside joke that we had or whatever. So, and everybody would be like, if I didn't, and I'm pretty quick about it, if I didn't send out the Slack in half an hour, I would get, hey, where's my Slack? No, it was a crazy thing. And at the end of the quarter, it was really tough to manage, but it was just building that relationship every single time. Hey, I see you. I see that you did this. Hey, I know this was in the pipeline for 45 days. Way to get it nailed in. This really helped us with our quarter. And it wasn't just a congrats type of thing. So that was a big part of it.
Fantastic. AI is obviously everywhere today. There's lots of, I feel like we're in very early innings on this. So, obviously there's been a big push around AI SDRs and a lot of AI stuff in marketing. How do you see it? Obviously it's going to affect, you're building something that's going to kind of help the reps be more productive. How do you think it affects leadership?
Listen, I think that there's always been, especially if you're on LinkedIn a lot, this kind of what are other people doing that I should be doing? I think that that's 100x since this AI wave. I don't know, maybe my feed is just curated a certain way, but I would say it feels like more than half the posts I read are about, look at this cool thing I'm doing in Clay. Look at this cool thing I'm doing with N8N. Look at this, what I'm doing with work. And to me, I look at it and my initial reaction is I suck. Like, I'm not doing these things. I couldn't even think of this. How am I not? I need to, I got to call somebody and get this on the horn. Let me get an agency and all that. But since I'm old and 50 years old, I pause for a second and be like, wait, do I suck just because I'm not doing this? Is this actually something that will work, or is it just cool? Because, Alexa back there, I've had her set up in my house where, like, if I drive into the driveway, it opens garage door. It turns on the lights. It transfers my music from the car into the house, and it does all these things. But the amount of time that I spent maintaining that and making sure it worked was way more than just flipping on the light switch and, hitting the garage door open button. So that's I think the real thing that leaders need to think about right now in AI is, just because I can do it and somebody is doing it, should I do it? And does it match my style and how I think sales should be done? But that to me is like the biggest problem right now is there's a lot of Me Too stuff. And the next thing you know, you'll be a spam cannon, like all these people posting about sending 40,000 emails. And I literally read a post. The dude was like, we sent 40,000 emails this month for our client. They're so happy. They got 39 qualified leads. I was like, not meetings, not deals, qualified leads, 40,000 emails. I was like, dude, do you know what your customer should be saying? 1% reply rate, you suck.
Yeah.
You suck.
Yeah. No, and we're all on the receiving end of that. So,
That's right.
please less of those. Please less of those. More of operator.
But don't go in that direction. That's the direction you want to go to. Set it and forget it. More efficiency, less reps. It'll happen the same way I want it to happen every single time. Listen, we might get there, but I don't think we're there yet. And that Me Too, read this stuff on everybody's doing on LinkedIn, I think it can be dangerous.
Yeah, I agree on that. Just looking at your back of your career from, selling shoes at the mall to leading global sales teams, doing all of that, what do you think, can you think of a mistake that taught you a really pivotal lesson?
Yeah. I was in my first outside sales job, and I sold stuff to schools, and I had about a 2.5 month selling window where I would make 80% of my commissions as I ran those programs throughout the year. So it's critical. Well, I did a really good job doing the suitcase thing and stuff like that, of booking that time out. Well, the one year I had a really aggressive goal. Well, halfway through that selling season, I had hit the goal. So I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm selling stuff to like people that I have to meet with after school. And my territory is a huge part of central Pennsylvania. So I'm driving like 3-4 hours to meetings that are at like 8:00 at night. And I'm a family guy. I'm kind of a homebody. I love my kids, love my family. And so I'm not the kind of guy that's like trying to get out of the house at night to, because I don't want to be around my family. So at halfway through that selling period, I was like, if I knew if I canceled those meetings, I might not get invited back in the future.
Right.
So I was like, I got to go to them. So I started going to them, but I have revised my approach. And instead of selling, I just went in and was like this. Hey, Doug, listen, I do fundraisers 3 ways. A, B, C. If you don't like any of those, I'm not for you. And I would stop. I signed up more people in the second half than the first half. And what I learned was my desperation to get the sale, because I was on 100% commission to feed my family, my desperation, it had an odor. You could smell it. It was around me. It was an energy. And when I sold from a place of, I don't care if I win the deal, I'm just going to tell you what I do and hope, and if it's a match, and then I'm going to help you be confident in making a good decision. When I learned it, that was probably the biggest sales lesson I've ever had. I don't think I sell anymore. What I do is I just try to understand and help. And sometimes that leads to my solution. Sometimes it leads to other solutions. And I don't care anymore.
I think that's such a great lesson. I've often said, I've used waiters at restaurants as my example of, great salespeople. The ones that I love are not the ones who direct you to the most expensive dish or bottle of wine. The ones I love are the ones who's like, oh, here's one that's particularly a rare find, or I'd stay away from the meatloaf, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then we're best friends. Then that's kind of what I want in a salesperson as well, because I think that it's really obvious if someone's trying to push something that really isn't a solution for you.
My biggest thing I tell salespeople is your job isn't to sell. Your job is to help make people make confident decisions, because 3 things happen when you do that. 1, you get the deal. Great. 2, they go with somebody else and it was the right decision for them and it solves their problem. That's good too. And third is, if they buy the wrong thing, they come back to you because you help them feel confident and people remember that. And so 2 out of 3 situations are okay for you. 3 out of 3 situations are good for the customer. So like, I just think that that's where we get lost, is just help people be confident in their decisions. Usually when you do that, they'll go with the person that made them feel the most confident.
Fantastic. So if you look forward, let's say 5 years, I know it's an eternity in our world, right? But usually like operators really achieved its mission fully. What do you think the day-to-day life of a salesperson looks like?
I think that it's spent a lot more in meetings and prepping for meetings. Like the one thing that AI can't do yet is it can't hold a meeting and do all that kind of stuff. But if I'm a rep and I have 2 meetings today, and each of them might take me an hour to prep for, they're each a half an hour, that only leaves me, with 3 or 4 hours to do internal meetings, to do my catch up, my follow up, all that stuff, and my prospecting. And I think that it at Outreach, I think we somewhat solve this by creating like the sequence mentality of, I'm going to do these steps in this order, which I still think is by far the best way to organize your outreach and your prospecting. It's just what you put into that. And so I think that my hope is that we spend less time doing the work it takes to get in front of people so that we can spend more time making the time we're in front of people better.
I love it. Just a few questions to wrap up as we end our time here. So if you can automate one task in your life forever using AI, what would it be?
I have a very specific way of how I follow up with people. I do it all individually. I go back and I use Fathom and I type in, what are the 3 problems that they said are the most, so I kind of like reorient myself. And then I have this task system that I use in HubSpot that I'm very maniacal about. And so that I have a task on every single deal that tells me exactly, it's like a next step, but I have them all, but I know what the next steps are. So they're all kind of, they're laid out. And so every deal must have an open task on it that aligns to the stage and what I'm trying to do with it. So if I could get a CRM to auto create those tasks and get me like closer to the follow-up stuff that I'm doing, that would be pretty good. It'd be coffee, let's say.
We'll talk offline about that. That one's a good one, Mark.
That was true. That is actually what I would. That's actually what I would automate.
There's no setup. There's no cash exchanged here. Everyone, just to be clear, this is not a pitch. What is so? By the way, a fellow Pennsylvania boy. I love the crocus story. Grew up in the Poconos. But what's something you're passionate about that might surprise people?
I doubt I have anything surprising. I mean, the number one thing that is my self-identity is being a father. I love my kids. I love hanging out with my kids. I don't just love them. I enjoy them. They're my best friends. That might sound pathetic to some, but that's because you don't have the type of relationship that I have with my kids. If you think that's pathetic, we have fun. We do stuff together. And so I would say that's probably my biggest passion is just, and I have a neonatal intensive care unit nurse that's saving little babies. I have a daughter that's leading marketing for a young startup in San Francisco. I have a son that's a junior at Temple, and then I have my little high schooler. But like when we get together, we have a great time, and it's really awesome to have a relationship with your kids. It's very open, honest. They tell me what's going on in their lives. I tell them what's going on in my lives, and we help each other out.
I love that. Yeah, I think it is a very fun phase. My youngest is 21, just about to be 22, and just watching them on that journey, be able to go out and grab a beer with them or grab a cocktail with them and go have dinner and have these life conversations and travel together. It's incredibly fun. So I
took all of them and some plus ones to Portugal this summer, and it was the best trip I ever had. But Doug, the thing I have a skill at that would be surprising to people is I guarantee you my yard, my edging, and my mowing is better than 99.99999% of people. I always have the best yard in the neighborhood. Always.
100% guaranteed it's better than mine because I have zero in the area. Zero.
That's my quit thinking about SaaS and B2B sales and just go veg out listening to a sports podcast for an hour and a half while I make my yard beautiful. That's kind of my mental break for the week.
I love it. So what is one thing you can't live without in your daily routine?
I have a 3-monitor setup and my productivity goes down significantly. So I have one here, I have the laptop one here, and I have one over here. And that 3-monitor setup is pretty key. I'm also, I am a productivity nerd. And so I have a application called Logseq, Logseq, that is an open source outlining / whatever super nerdy productivity tool. I would be in trouble if I didn't have that, because I have, like I said, I have really bad memory. So I have a system to remember things, and that's kind of like my second brain, my personal knowledge management system, I think is what it's officially titled. But I use that religiously to keep track of what I'm doing in my personal and professional life.
Is there a specific way where you organize what's on the 3 monitors?
Yes. So on my left here is communication. So Slack, iMessage. In the middle is my browser. And then I have like Spotify on there. And then on my right-hand side, I have a full screen of my ARC tabs that are my CRM, my calendar, and LinkedIn. And then I have another space that has my Logseq in it. So it's always in the same exact arrangement.
Your Bloomberg terminal, your mission control.
It really is.
Center. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And then finally, just how can listeners keep in touch with you and help you on your mission?
Yeah, I post daily on LinkedIn. That's the only social. I don't have Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. That's the only thing I do is LinkedIn, and that's the best way. I feel like I'm pretty responsive for DMs and comments and stuff like that. But yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Well, Mark, I love this conversation. I'm very excited for the official public launch of Operator to see what's there. I love the examples you shared. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, buddy. Good seeing you.
Great to see you. Have a great one.